Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20, joining me for another week of Parramatta and NRL news, and my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, even though it's the off-season, there is still so much happening. The rumour cycle is in overdrive right now of some player movement happening with both Parramatta and other clubs involved. But as always, let's get to you boys first, and I'll throw it to you, Sixties. How you doing, big fella?
Well, actually, is it the off-season? I mean, the temperature, it feels like the middle of winter.
It's gone from it's balmy summer weather to winter in the blink of an eye.
What about you, Clint? You're surviving the resurgence of winter?
Oh, I tell you what, I'm like a Mentos ad from a bygone era earlier this morning. It's a it's a bit of a surprise the weather at the minute, but the rugby league news continues and keeps us all on our toes. So I guess to echo your sentiments from earlier, the rugby league season lives on, as does winter for today at least.
And rain or sunshine, winter or summer, it's always good to have a good round of golf. So shout out to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf out at Northmead, as well as Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, helping us make each and every episode happen. And now, boys, let's get right into it.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, right off the bat, we've got Parramatta making some of rugby league's headlines over the last few days. So we'll talk about some of the things that have been discussed. First thing is the rumoured attempted swap of Josh Addo-Carr and Ryan Matterson, where the Eels are looking to secure Addo-Carr from the Bulldogs. Talk that the Bulldogs are keen to get a forward, so the Eels would be considering Matterson. I don't know how much truth there is to this. I haven't heard anything that's come out of the club. It seems to be something that Phil Gould is denying as far as the Dogs are concerned. What do you two boys make of this?
Phil Gould denying it the way he did makes me think that it's a done deal. That's usually how it goes with Phil Gould.
Yes.
Yeah, not a surprise to hear us linked to Addo-Carr. It's something you floated, 60s, in recent podcasts, purely as a hypothetical, sort of reading the market and reading, almost like an Occam's razor play there, where the Dogs have always looking to recruit, and Addo-Carr could have been surplus to requirements given their heavy needs in other primary positions like halfback. You did a good job sort of reading the tea leaves there. But in saying that, I don't know. I mean, there's talk about having, it being a player swap, but aren't Canterbury up against the cap themselves? Like, how would a player swap help them?
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about a club that even today has, and we're going to talk about it in our NRL news, has signed now Curran from the Warriors. So their list of recruits gets longer and longer. And now they're talking about a player swap where, as you say, they're up against it salary cap-wise. You would have thought before acquiring Curran, and there's no salary cap relief in a player swap, is there?
No, especially if someone of the profile of Ryan Matterson, where we know he was retained by the Eels on coin requisite to his performances on the field in the vicinity of $700,000 or so worth of media reports a season. So that would be a cap deficit, if anything, for the Canterbury Bulldogs when coming to the idea of swapping with Josh Addo-Carr. So, I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't have come from, almost certainly wouldn't have come from Parramatta's camp, given everything we've known about the Eels with their current administration. They just don't leak these sort of rumours. So, methinks it came from either manager or the Canterbury camps here in order to maybe just stir up Addo-Carr's value, because immediately in the wake of the Eels being linked to Addo-Carr in the last couple of days, we've had the Knights and a couple other clubs like the Dragons and the Tigers, I think, come out as also potential suitors that are keen to get the services of the representative winger. So maybe Canterbury are trying to sort of charge up a little bidding war if they are looking for a player swap. Let's say it is actually credible. Obviously, you want to try and get the best player possible. So maybe they're the ones that leak this in order to drum up as big a market as possible for Addo-Carr.
Look, nothing would surprise. You know my take, as you alluded to, when it comes to Josh Addo-Carr. I've been banging on about he had to be one of the Eels' targets. And you'd say from this he possibly, at the very least, there's an interest there. How much it's been embellished as far as the media reports are concerned, or what's been leaked out, we don't know. But Clint, would he be an acquisition that you would welcome? And secondly, do you realistically see the Eels swapping out forward like Ryan Matterson for Josh Addo-Carr?
I like the leading questions there, Sixties, because you absolutely read my mind in terms of the points I was going to make. 100% I'd welcome Josh Addo-Carr into our side. His speed would infinitely improve our back line. I'm sure we can all just imagine the short side raids with Mitch Moses, Will Penasini, and Josh Addo-Carr, assuming he would play on the right edge if he was to join our team, with Mike Acevo occupying the left edge. I think he'd be a fantastic addition to our side. If we could make it happen, let's do it yesterday. But it has to be under the right conditions. And swapping Ryan Matterson for Josh Addo-Carr, the suggestion of that, in my mind, is absolutely ludicrous. The value that we're talking about a forward who, for the duration of his contract with the Eels thus far, has averaged in the vicinity of almost 95% tackle efficiency and well into over the 130 meter mark across his 3-4 seasons to date with us now. So he's clearly someone that's of value to us. He's also someone who only recently extended after we'd lost a fair whack of our forward pack from the 2022 grand final squad. We know how much Brad Arthur likes to build his squads around a forward pack and having decent depth within the forwards, particularly going off the makeup and build of the squad of the last few seasons past. But look, I personally think that if and given our current cap situation and the fact that we're in the market for outside backs at the moment, we could absolutely make Josh Addo-Carr happen without having to swap anyone out. So this absolutely reeks of the Bulldogs trying to artificially inflate the value of Josh Addo-Carr and the demand around him. I think your inclinations and what you gestured to before, gents, is most likely on the mark there.
In the digital equivalent of a pub poll that I did, or was sort of privy to in the wake of that sort of rumour breaking initially the other day, there were a lot of people who I consider good judges of football that were quite happy to make that swap, give Ryan Matterson away to the Bulldogs to get Josh Addo-Carr. I think a lot of it has been coloured by the fact that people had their, understandably, I'm not saying this is a defence for Matto, but people were upset by his actions between the grand final and round one, where he, in the end, mistakenly, took the guilty plea for the suspension over the fine, ended up hurting the team pretty badly across the first 3 rounds, and I think that's coloured people, again, understandably, a bit against him there. But at the same time, there's a bit of me that's the devil's advocate here, saying that if you're for it, I'd be very careful of what you give up with getting Ryan Matterson out of the team. I think that he covers a lot. Maybe holds is the wrong word, but he takes on a pretty important workload in that second rotation for the middle for us, and we have to wait and see whether someone like Kelma Talangi can show that same versatility to play the middle and the edge in our system. But with Marata Niokore gone and Ryan Matterson here, I know Sean Lane's played a little bit in the middle, but Matto is our only true inside-outside or edge/middle hybrid forward. So he brings a lot of versatility to a team that loves having versatile pieces. So, yeah, if we did need to make way for someone in terms of cap space, which, God, I hope we don't have to, given all the talk about acquiring an X-Factor player and where that money go, then I don't know the answer to that question, because that is a difficult question. But, yeah, getting rid of Ryan Matterson, I wouldn't be jumping on board so quickly.
I
And
think as
of
well
course,
we oh sorry 60.
I was just going to say that the other player too that we allowed to leave that could play edge and middle was Ice.
Yes.
So you're talking about the loss of Nyakore and Ice, and if you added Matto into the mix, then that versatility factor that was there in 2022 would almost be non-existent then in 2024.
Good shout there, 60s.
And in addition to that, I think it's worth mentioning that we shouldn't allow our desire for outside backs to I guess create a rose-colored glass situation where we happily trade away a player who has those strengths, brings those attributes to our side, and we're talking about a guy who's played Origin as well here. Granted, it's only one game, and people will argue, he was a Freddie pick, he was a Freddie one-hit wonder or whatever, but he still played Origin, and he was playing some damn good football to get there, and he still, in my view, played some pretty good footy this year for us as well. So look, it's in terms of overall value, I think Ryan Matterson provides us a lot more value than what Josh Addo-Carr does, and not let any, I guess, negative sentiment towards Ryan Matterson and the way he handled his suspension from the NRL Grand Final into the beginning of the 2023 season.
Yeah, look, I think the other question that has to be asked is, where's our salary cap at? Because if we're talking about having to do a player swap to maybe make it happen from a financial point of view, that's a bit unexpected for mine. I mean, we were talking about earlier this year looking at recruiting an X factor outside back or fullback, and obviously that didn't transpire. You had to assume that we had money in the bank to be able to do it back then. I know that we've made some extensions to contracts since then, but again, you'd have to say that there was money that perhaps wasn't spent last season. I know you can't carry a whole lot of money over into the next year. The NRL has rules around that, but we must have budgeted going forward that there was money for outside back recruits and at least one significant one. So
there is one situation, 60s, where I am okay with us having to shed salary cap if it means signing an outside back. And that would be where we are making more than one acquisition in the backline. That would be the only situation which I think would be acceptable for our cap management. So it would mean getting, in this case, Josh Addo-Carr plus one, whether it's Connor Tracy or maybe someone else we're going to discuss in this podcast. That would be the only, in my books, the only way to be considered acceptable. Because you can't go from talking about getting an X factor to then talking about shedding core players to get... Josh Addo-Carr is a good player, but I would not say he is a great player at this stage. Which I know sounds a little bit disingenuous to how good Josh Addo-Carr is, but if you're talking about going and get a legitimate X factor, Addo-Carr enters that territory, but I don't think he's a marquee, bang the door, like kick down the door, bang the table sort of signing.
Well, he's not. He's probably not your $800,000-$900,000 a year acquisition. However, I would see him as someone who, if I want to categorise a signing as, does this player enhance the Eels' chances or enhance their premiership opportunities, then I would say, yes, they enhance. Now, I'm not, when I use that word enhance, I'm be very, very clear about this. I don't mean he turns them into premiership winners. But I mean he improves their lot.
I agree.
In terms of being able to compete with teams.
It's one of the most simple but important criteria for either judging an actual recruit or looking at a prospective recruit is, does this get you closer to a premiership? And I think Addo-Carr does.
Yes.
And that's why maybe people listening to me in the last few episodes might have, heard me being a little bit dour on someone like Morgan Harper, because I think that's at the other side of the spectrum where I don't think that moves the needle towards a premiership. And I understand you've got to have guys that feel like a squad, but given where we are with the back line, I was a little bit disappointed that was the first signing we made. So Addo-Carr is a positive, don't get me wrong, but again, I would be upset if it meant if we were in a position where we had to shed caps to get a Josh Addo-Carr, I would be frustrated. But if we
you'd be saying there's something's wrong with our cap, that we haven't got the space to be able to make an acquisition like that. Now, you said before about a second acquisition. Well, maybe that's the problem, is that we are looking at two recruits, and of course, a name that still keeps floating around at the moment is Papenhuyzen from the Storm. Now, obviously, injury. Let's make it a plural. Injuries are a major concern with Ryan Papenhuyzen. Now, if he got a medical clearance, is he someone that you would be very pleased with the Eels recruiting? Throw it to you first, 40.
Yeah, I think you talk about, again, the word gets overused, but X factor. Papenhuyzen, at least pre-knee shattering, had that in spades by virtue of being just elite in speed. And speed is arguably the single greatest ingredient towards a premiership that the Eels lack. They've got the power, they've got agile players like Will Penasini, they've got skillful and talented players across the park, in the forwards, in the back line, in the halves. They haven't got out and out speed. Josh Addo-Carr has that. Ryan Papenhuyzen has that. And I think, then comes a conversation of where do you play him? Is he going to be your fullback? And then you put Guffers in the centre and whatnot. I think that's probably the way you go to it. But in the vacuum, it comes back to that idea of you go out and get the talented player and then you figure out everything else after. I think Papenhuyzen improves the team, assuming that he passes your medicals. His most recent injury was the broken ankle, which initially looked awful. It looked like it was going to be a bad compound fracture, but the reports in the wake of it were that it was much better than initially anticipated. And I imagine he'll be back to essentially a full preseason, so that shouldn't put him back too much behind the old timeline there for recovery. But yeah, I would strongly consider a Ryan Papenhuyzen acquisition if he is there, and again, if he passes your medicals. He has the out and out speed, and we're a team with the Dylan Browns, the Mitchell Moseses, the even out in the centres, the Will Penasinis, and even guys like Sean Lane. They have all these opportunities just waiting there for someone like Ryan Papenhuyzen to be screaming onto the ball.
Yep, and we have an unusual situation where probably the fastest players in our back line are the players that are starting off with the ball in their hand in our halves.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw last year opportunities that were created, but we didn't have the pace to finish them off a number of times, especially in that run of really close losses that we had at the start of the year. And you have to think just how costly that was in the scheme of things as it worked out with where the Eels finished, that 1, 2 or 3 of those narrow losses, those 4-point losses, turned into a win. I mean, we know that those losses actually came down to missed goal kicking at the time, but within those were try opportunities not taken. So a little bit of extra pace, and whether that's coming from the fullback chiming in, whether it's the winger at the end of the line, whatever the case may be, it was an area where we didn't excel, and where a number of other clubs have some really fast outside backs. Clint, would you take a Ryan Papenhuyzen if he were to come to the Eels? Would you be welcoming him with open arms?
I'm definitely open to it, cautiously open to it. You guys touched on something incredibly important there, and speed is absolutely what we're missing. It's the ingredient that we just need to add to our recipe to hopefully crack this premiership duck that we're currently experiencing. But look, at the same time, and maybe this is just a love for our current captain. Geez, Gutho adds so much to us defensively as well, and are we potentially sacrificing points conceded?
There's a legit opportunity cost
that
there.
yeah, are we chasing attack and then sacrificing a little bit in our defense? I guess is the main point that I'm getting at there. And he's central to a lot of the things that we do. And Gutho is an excellent player. He's an excellent fullback, and I know you two both hold him in high regard as well. And the only knock on his game is that he just lacks that little bit of acceleration over the first 10 meters that would probably make him super elite. But it'd be a good problem to have, and I absolutely adopt 40's mantra of you find if the opportunity presents itself, you then find a way to make all the players work and fit inside the 17.
Part of me also thinks that after missing the boat on some of those guys in the last 18 months, it comes back to guys like Herbie Farnworth and even someone like the Hammer, who you could have taken a flyer on, before he joined Redcliffe. And even as someone who wanted us to get Hammer back in the day, I didn't project him to turn out as good as he has. So that's like not me. So I toot my own horn. It's more like that was just an incredible opportunity for anyone that could have got him. We're sort of forced to take risks now, and it's frustrating. But someone like Papenhuyzen, who has the injury history, your medicals might not be as clean as you'd want, but maybe you got to take those chances. If you think that this team has what it takes to win a premiership, and they got to a grand final, so obviously they have the qualities, but they're missing a little bit, you might have to take those risks now because the window is going to start closing. We've got forwards that are getting older, Junior and Reg, and they're still playing very good football, but they are going to start slowing down. So maybe you do have to take those risks now in the next year or two. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, I'm going to move on, fellas, because I wanted to talk about the putting a player like Matthew Arthur into the headlines in the last week. Now, I know that journos are looking for a story, and they also knew that in talking about another Arthur coming through into first grade, that they were going to trigger a certain element within the Eels supporter group, and they did so successfully. Right, we've all seen some of the reactions on certain sites and also in the responses to the Fox Sports, the article as it appeared on the Fox Sports Facebook page and website. Let's just get a couple of things into perspective here. First of all, to clarify something, Buds Arthur is not on the development list for next year. So there was an inaccuracy to start off with straight away. He will be on a development contract in 2025, not in 2024. So there are others that are in his age group that have been elevated to a higher contract faster than him. So let's just make that very clear right from the start. Secondly, there's been an increased profile put on him because the last name is Arthur. There are just as many talented players that are coming through from his particular SG Ball and Jersey Flegg team that will be involved in the Eels squad next year, and whether they are dev list or whether they are on other tiered contracts that allows them to train with the Eels, you are going to see an influx of younger players in there. So we're going to see the likes of Blaze Talangi involved. And Blaze, and people would be aware, Blaze was actually on a development contract this year. All right. Now, he is a talented player, but there weren't too many headlines about Blaze being on a development contract already this year. He's a player that deserves one. And I thought he had quite a remarkable season, given his injuries, to have the impact in the team that he ended up having in both the SG Ball and the Jersey Flegg. It was a fantastic season. But, we're also going to see players coming through, the likes of Richard Penasini's coming through. You've got Jock Brazel coming through. You've got Charlie Geimer coming through. You've got Sam Tuiviti coming through. We've got Arpa Twiddle coming through. He inked a 2-year deal with the Eels just recently. So there are a number of players that are forcing their way through the pathways. And unfortunately, because his name's Arthur, Buds has copped the attention in the media. So first of all, to Eels supporters, I'll say this: there is an influx of younger players coming through. Matt Arthur's just one of them, and as far as things go in terms of how he plays, I think a lot of the negative comments have come from people who have never seen him play, because anyone who's seen him play is not going to be making some of the comments that we've seen floating around.
A lot of armchair experts were having some deep analysis on his game and the weaknesses of his playing kit. Yeah,
it's actually been quite ludicrous. But I merely wanted to speak on it today, simply to pick up the main inaccuracy, which is he's not on the development list next year. So people can make of that what they want. But for those who are talking about, an Arthur gets fast-tracked ahead of other players, there's your first example. He's not on a dev list next year. So there you go. There's the correction straight away. So I think we'll leave it at that, because I don't want to put Woodsy in the headlines or anything like that. All I wanted to do was just to clarify an inaccuracy from the report. So, but he does, as we've said, have that contract where he will be on a dev list in 2025, not 2024. Now, I'm going to move on from there. Fellas, I wanted to talk about the Eels NRLW player, Mahalia Murphy, and her how she's currently starring on the current series of SAS. And that was obviously filmed before the NRLW season. But, it's a shame that it wasn't shown before the season, because
it would have explained a lot. It would have explained a lot. A beast off the field, a beast on the field.
Well, look, she was absolutely one of the shining lights in what was a very ordinary season for our Eels. But watching her in this series, it's no surprise to see that why she was one of the stronger players in the team during such a tough season. Have you managed to catch much of her performance in the SAS series at all, fellas?
I've only seen some snippets, but I was impressed. That was after you pointed out to me how well she was going, so I went out and had a little poke around. And I'm not a big free-to-air TV watcher anymore. I'm not a big TV watcher in general, actually. So, yeah, I went out of my way to watch a little bit of it, and, without seeing the broader context, I was still impressed. And like we're just saying, it does explain a lot about why she was so impressive on the field as an Eel.
Oh, look, the mental fortitude for a start, but the way she pushes herself physically. And there was one of the more physical contests that was like a game of murder ball, where she was up against the fellow whose claim to fame is that he was the original bachelor. But the bloke is obviously a little bit older than her, but built like, he's obviously spends a lot of time in the gym.
Yeah.
And she got the better of him. And it was quite the contest. But apart from that, just her resilience and toughness is, and leadership, actually. I mean, she comes across as quite the leader. So it will be interesting to see what happens next year in terms of the Eels team. But she's certainly been someone that's stood out. And as I said, I think it would have been great promotion for the Eels and for the NRLW if she had been starring on SAS before the season kicked off rather than after the season had finished. So, Anyway, that's been good to watch. And so she's still in it. They're down to the final 6 in the series. And it's the last week of the show coming up next week. So if you haven't had a chance to catch it. There's only a couple of episodes to go, and we'll see if she ends up making selection. Now, fellas, it's time to switch over to a bit of general NRL news. 40, you got a bit of... you were talking to me the other day about the situation around Dominic Young.
Yeah, I was sort of just eating my dinner, had the news on in the background, and they led with a report saying that Tom Young's in hospital with a sinus infection that had spread to his brain. I was like, oh my goodness. You don't hear that too often. So it was in a serious but stable condition, evidently, and which would hopefully imply that he's on the way to recovery. But that's terrifying. Like whenever you get a stuffy nose due to a sinus infection, you got that pain around your sort of eye sockets, and then to think that that can spread to your brain and then become a real issue, the more you know.
Yeah, and I often wonder too about hearing of, well, I'll keep it to rugby league athletes that have to be hospitalised where something has gone wrong, like something that starts off quite simple has gone wrong. Is it, Clint, is there something about being an athlete where their body is always being pushed to the limits that, you know, something simple like a sinus infection or a cut, or, you know, something happens where the body is under attack in a way that maybe most regular people wouldn't be, you know, having difficulties with?
I absolutely think that's the case. You know, you think of the level of training and what they put their body through. It's constantly in a state of stress. You know, stress from the weights and the barbells. Stress from a cardiovascular perspective. They're constantly pushing the limits of their VO2 max. You know, then from a skills perspective as well. You know, things are done at pace and a constant change of direction. And you know, it's not like they have an off season and they go, oh, okay, well, I don't do any type of training at all for a period of 8 to 9 weeks. And obviously, Dom Young went deep into the season with Newcastle in the semi-finals. And was he part of the Great Britain?
Yeah, he was in camp when it happened, I believe.
So he was training as so it's not only not beyond the realms of possibility. I personally believe, and you know, I'm saying this with anecdotal evidence as opposed to direct evidence. But when you think of it in its most simplest form, these are guys who have their bodies constantly in a state of stress. They're rarely relaxed. Probably the only time they're really relaxed is when they're sleeping, and you know, that's just so they can recover just in time to produce their next level of output, and then watch, rinse, repeat that cycle. So yeah, you look. Obviously, I'm also a big believer that the body, the human body, is a smart thing, and it sends you messages in the form of the way in which you know, in terms of your physical and mental well-being. So I have no doubt that there's probably something to what you're saying there, Sixties.
Yeah, well, it always seems to be. You know, you're always reading about there's, you know, a players had to be put in hospital on a drip. You know, they've got a case of the flu, or they've got blood poisoning from. And I know that happens obviously when they've got a cut and they've been playing out on a muddy field or what have you, but they end up with blood poisoning, or there's always seems to be a player that's in hospital for something that. I mean, it obviously does happen to the general public. Like people have to be hospitalised with the flu from, you know, like in extreme circumstances or what have you. But you know, you see instances where they're in hospital and then they're playing by the weekend, but they're in hospital
I
like
think it
during
happened
the
a few times with Blake Ferguson in his time with us, didn't it?
Yeah, it's from my recollection, there will be multiple times during a year where you hear about players that are hospitalised for one reason or another, but they're back playing within a week or two. But sometimes, yes, within the same week, they're off to hospital, they're having to spend time in hospital. And I just wondered whether, you know, because you make the assumption that these people are as fit and as healthy as you can get for, so much fitter and healthier than the average person, but, seem to be prone to picking up serious versions of illnesses that are floating around. Anyway, just an off the cuff anecdotal sort of comment. Moving on, we now have a bit of dogs news. First of all, I'm going to throw to you again, 40, because you were the one that enlightened me with this. The injury to Oloapu, one where there's talk of the extreme rehabilitation, which might mean sitting out for a year in 2024. I mean, do you think that's going to happen? Firstly, can you enlighten us as to the details of the injury, and then whether you think this is actually likely to play out to be a sitting out the game for 12 months situation?
Yeah, the way it was initially framed, and of course the media are always going to try and push for the most sensational headline. I think it was Danley Weiler that broke it initially, saying that he's facing the prospect of playing no football in 2024 with a reevaluation to happen once he goes post-surgery, which I think the implication was an implication about his long-term future, as if he might be at risk of not playing ever again. So I don't know what he's done with his neck, but it involves his neck. He's getting neck surgery. So now he's short and, I suppose, long-term future are at risk, but that seems like a worst case outcome here. I'm not sure if there's been a follow-up to it, but yeah, one way or the other, he's got a neck injury to deal with, which is never good, even if it is not a major neck injury, if you knock on wood, for a player's young future.
Yep. Okay, so now we'll go from illness and injury to recruitment, and we'll stay with the Dogs to start things off. Josh Curran is now signed with the Dogs. They seem to be able to continue to acquire players, Clint. They seem to be doing this better than... I'm not saying that their recruits are better than other clubs, but they seem to sign more players than other clubs are able to do. It's like sign now, work it out later scenario.
Afterpay NRL edition.
Yeah, but I tell you what, I'm finding it hard to knock the acquisition of Josh Curran. He is a player that I think we spoke about him recently. That would you sign him at the Eels? And I said, well, yes. And 40 said, I look with, cautionary is that would he actually fill a need that we have? Do we actually have a need for someone like him? No, probably not. But is he going to add value to a team like the Bulldogs? I'll throw it to you, Clint. I've got a feeling I know what your answer will be. Does he add value to the Bulldogs?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little annoying seeing one of our major rivals get a good acquisition like that, because he's probably the archetype of player that balances out some of the other style of players that they've got in that back row. Obviously you've got Kikau, who's a damaging ball runner. You've got Preston, who is a fantastic defender. I think he had somewhere in the vicinity of like a 94-95% tackle efficiency on the edge, playing for the Bulldogs, whose defense was absolutely trashed this year. So, and then you got Curran, who is a good line runner. He can absolutely hit a hole, and then likewise is. I know he has his moments where he drops off tackles, but likewise he's largely pretty dependable in defence. Whether they choose to use him as a middle or use him on the edge, to be seen. I suppose it depends on how they want to use Preston as well, and whether they see him exclusively as an edge player or someone they want to see lead their defensive line in the middle third. But he is a player. We were speaking about Matto being someone who gives us options earlier. Curran is someone who gives the Bulldogs options. So it's a good pickup. How they managed to do it, don't know. The Gus recruitment strategy of sling as many signings against the wall and see what sticks is absolutely made its way out from Penrith to Canterbury. So, and work the rest out later, as you touched on there. So, I think they've got a good one here, and a 2-year deal is probably good for both sides. It allows Curran to probably raise his value to that side, and angle for a pay increase should he have a good season in 2024. And likewise, if the Bulldogs decide that he's not for more, they're not stuck with him for too long.
Yep, absolutely. Now, next we had Jerome Luai, who was allowed to test the market, and it now seems 40 like the Panthers have been able to come in with a very competitive offer of their own.
Yeah, far more competitive than I had anticipated. I mean, I'm not a cap expert in terms of trying to keep track of where each club is at, but I sort of had him projected at maybe $750,000 coming from the Panthers. But the rumor now is, I say rumor, the report from the media is that there's a 2-year, $1.7 million deal on the table from the Penrith Panthers for Jerome Luai, so $850 per, which is a very competitive deal. I'm going to be honest. Like, that is a very competitive deal, reflective of Luai's talents and his role within the team, where he has other players in the spine and in the back row in particular that help carry the playmaking load. I think he'll get a much longer deal in the open market, and I think he will get a better value deal in the open market. So he'll be probably closer to $1 million per, whether it's 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. One of the poorer clubs. Poorer is such a weird thing to use in that term, but poorer in terms of success, not poorer in terms of cap space. Clubs are able to throw at him, but it's going to take a pretty sensational deal to prize him from Penrith, in my opinion. 2 years, $850 lets him go, kind of like in the Josh Curran situation that you just detailed, Quinn. It lets him go back to the field this year, or this coming season, next year, have another good season, and then go back to the market again with another great year of performance, and maybe a better buyer's market for him to attack. So yeah, he's in a very good situation now. He can take that deal and be very happy, or he can, as a 3-time premiership winner now, look to cash in elsewhere and get that mega payday at a different club. So yeah, well done to him. Like we've mentioned in the past, I think there is an element of buyer beware for those that are courting Jerome Luai, particularly if you haven't got a very good organising halfback. For
Absolutely.
instance, at the Bulldogs, the idea of Luai and Burton playing 6 and 7, or Oloapu, who looks to have transitioned more to a lock forward role, regardless of that injury that we just spoke about. None of that trio really, it's not worthy, but fit into a number 7 jersey in the conventional sense. So you can back yourself into a corner with a high-profile recruitment of a player like Luai if you haven't got the pieces there to make him the final piece of the puzzle, rather than being, the guy to come in and carry a load. So, but he's in a fantastic position individually. Like I said, he can go back to Penrith, get a very handsome payday, and go back to the market next year with another $850,000 to come into his bank account after that. Or he can take the big money payday now. So well done to him, and be very interesting to see how it all plays out, because that Penrith offer was far more competitive than I thought they'd be able to put together.
What sort of money, Clint, do you think would need to be offered by a club to steal him away from the Panthers?
It would have to be in excess of $1 million, and it would be the length of the deal. I personally think it would take if we're talking Canterbury here, I think they'd have to offer over $1 million, $1 to $1.1 million over a 4-year deal, at the very least, to really get wet his lips and make him consider making the move. Look, personally, if I'm Jerome Luai and a 3-peat premiership winner, I do think it's time to cash in and make some bank and look after the long term. You're going to have a legacy regardless of what happens from this point in time. Whether you like Jerome Luai or not, he's a part of NRL history now, a colourful character in that history. So I don't think anyone, including the Panthers, would besmirch him for wanting to take the money if it's on offer. But if I am him, and to tack on to the end of 40's points there, he should make it count. And I'd be milking external offers as much as I could for every dollar I could, so that you almost put yourself in a situation where you go, this money's too silly to say no to.
Go get your Godfather offer.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's swap over from talking about the Panthers. We've covered the Dogs. We've looked at the Panthers. Now over at the Sea Eagles, first of all, Nathan Brown, a 1-year deal, it looks like. What's going on there?
Yeah, that was a report that it started as a rumor on socials, and then I think it manifested into an actual mainstream press outlet covering it as either fact or essentially waiting to happen. So a 1-year deal for Nathan Brown on the Northern Beaches.
Do you know what? I recall in the dark recesses of my mind that he had an opportunity.
Yeah, he did.
He
to
did.
go to
Yep.
He did.
Yeah.
You're 100%
It was
right.
very
They
close.
were, before he re-signed with us prior to obviously the big split happening, I believe Manly were his quarters in that case, and he ended up staying at Parramatta but had a pretty reasonable deal for Manly on the table. So no surprise that they've come back now. Well, there probably should be a surprise because, Brownie's form hasn't been fantastic, but, sometimes, as with us with Morgan Harper, sometimes the market, dictates who your depth signings are.
Well, I'm prepared to go out on a limb here, and I'm being a little bit facetious in saying this, that his deal won't be in the vicinity of what he was offered before.
I
I haven't really gone out on a limb.
No.
Now, the complete opposite of that is Haumole Olakau'autu.
Holy moly of an offer,
Yeah.
Olakau'autu.
Now, Haumole Olakau'autu, former student at Guildford West Public School, mate. Former student at Guildford West Public School has, yes. Well, let's throw it to you again, John. What's the details going on here?
So he recently had a short-term extension inked with the Seagulls, I believe, or his current contract carries through for another 2 seasons. But Manly are very keen to keep the Sharks at bay and not let him get anywhere near the free agency market. And the rumour is that they've offered him what would be in total an 8-year deal, but a 6-year extension on his current deal, worth in the vicinity of $850K per, to keep him tenured for pretty much the majority of his playing career as a Manly Seagull. And look, Olakau'autu, very talented, no doubts, but we have spoken about plenty of these contracts in the past. When you start getting past 4 or 5 years, especially for a non-spine player, you are putting yourself at a lot of risk and opening up a lot of vulnerability on your cap. If there are any long-term injuries that aren't career enders that let you go through the whole insurance process of writing off a contract. And Olakau'autu is very, very talented. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, an 8-year contract is, in my mind, fairly crazy.
Can we also assume that there would be some clauses in there that if the salary cap was increased,
They are mandatory now, I believe. I believe ratcheting clauses are actually baked into all contracts.
At least from a CPI perspective, right?
Yes. Yeah. But to some extent, ratcheting clauses are baked into. It's a standardized clause. I don't know about like full-on cap increases like we're going to see when we get all the stuff ratified, but and then for the next CBA. But yeah, ratchet clauses to some degree are baked into contracts now.
Yeah, well, I'll throw this to Clint. He can do. We'll have to come up with different words, but our equivalent of the old try, no try signs that people used to be able to hold up, or they still do at the football. But what's your verdict here, Clint? An 8-year deal for Haumole Olakau'autu, as John said, terrific player. Like if suddenly he said, look, I'm fed up with living on the northern beaches. I'm fed up of the good money over here. I'm fed up of being a star in this team. I'm going to come to Parramatta. Like I'd be very, very pleased about that. But 8 years. What's your verdict on a contract of that length?
That is a big fat no try.
Yes, yeah.
It's just it's too long. It's far too long for a non-spine player, as 40's just said. And even spine territory, spine players, you're looking at very risky territory. And I know we say that obviously with the caveat that Dylan Brown has a long-term contract. with the view that both player and club can renegotiate and reevaluate their contract at certain intervals. And that's not to say that the proposed contract for Haumole Olakau'autu doesn't have that either. But I think back all those years ago to the Terry Campese contract at Canberra. I think it was a 5-year deal, and obviously he had a wretched run of injuries that interrupted that, and he signed that deal after coming off a career year. But 8 years, so much can change in that time, in that space of time. Do you guys know where you were 8 years ago, or what you were doing? You think about everything that's happened between that point in time and now. Your life's completely changed. It'll be the same for everyone listening to this right now. So much happens between now and then. I get from the player perspective, it's great. You're locking in income for almost a decade. But from a club perspective, you got to question if someone's doing their due diligence there.
8-year, 10-year contracts. You're starting to talk baseball, like obviously not the same sort of money, but in terms of duration, talking baseball contracts, and they're traditionally done with understanding that you're getting production out of the first half of the contract, then it starts to slow down the second half, and then at the very end, there's just essentially void years in the contract. Like you're either going to be cutting the player, trading the player, or just taking them on as a black hole in your roster. And that's the same risk you face in rugby league when you take on a player, because like you said, 8 years, you can barely remember what you're doing 8 years ago, let alone project where you're going to be in 8 years in the future. So yeah, I'm not a fan, and I know it's meant to be a free market with the NRL within the restrictions of the salary cap, but these sort of contracts alongside the Tamalolo one, it does make you wonder if it needs to be better clarity and structures put in place to provide framework for long-term deals, because all it takes is one club anchoring their salary cap with the wrong player, which is going to happen at some point, whether it's Tamalolo getting hurt or Olakau'autu getting hurt but not hurt enough to retire, or it's someone else. Some club is going to put themselves into a world of pain of a long-term contract, and they're going to come begging the NRL to help them. And right now there is no support for that, and that's maybe why we need to, we being the NRL, obviously not the TCT podcast, the tip sheet, might need to talk about a framework for these long-term deals about what you can and can't do.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to get to that point. At the other end of the scale, we've got another bright star on the rise in Sua Wong, extending for 2 years at the Roosters. Now, the coin's not as much.
Still healthy.
The deal's not as long. He's undoubtedly a talent. 40. Yeah,
he was one of the breakout young players this year. Was very, very handy on the edge for the Roosters. Great work rate on and off the ball. Was very, very nuanced as a line runner for a young guy. I think he was turning 20 this year. As he end up inking a 2-year, $850,000 extension. That's total, not per annum, so $425 per. Not mega money by any means, but very, very good money for a 20-year-old. So well done to him for securing the bag, as the young kids like to say. And hopefully he can, always a caveat of, hopefully he can do it, but not against the Parramatta Eels, but can continue to develop and progress, because he looks like a real talent. And, poor Roosters and unearthing another talented player.
Yeah. You got to feel sorry for them.
Oh, just
absolutely.
get the
now.
Pass my Kleenex.
Now, a bit of news also as well around the Warriors looking for a bit of an Anzac Day parody, mate.
Yeah, this was a breaking story actually. Just as we went to record here on Thursday, the Warriors, I think it's been 7 or 8 years of Anzac tests now, which again comes back to Quint's point about what we were doing 8 years ago. I didn't even know the Anzac test was that old now, but 8 years ago or thereabouts, and it's every installment of the Anzac test. Obviously, there are 2 Anzac games that are played on the public holiday, but the actual Anzac part of it, the Australia-New Zealand part of it being the Melbourne Storm New Zealand Warriors, has always taken place in Amy Park or in Melbourne throughout the lifetime of that test, and they're now asking that the games be shared between Australia and New Zealand, which, you know what, that's very, very greedy of them, boys. How dare they ask for that sort of parody in an Australian-New Zealand celebration of an important part of our history. But yeah, I think this is a no-brainer, much like how we spoke about. I mean, it's not quite the same as the COVID stuff. We talked about giving back to the Warriors there. This one, given the history between the two countries involved here and the Warriors' importance in the NRL, I'm actually surprised it's taken this long to ask.
Yeah. It's something where I guess you've got the example of the Easter Monday clash between the Eels and the Tigers, where it alternates whose home match it is each year. Clint, do you see that as a fair thing for the Warriors to be asking for?
Absolutely, and it should be a no-brainer decision for the NRL in terms of draw scheduling as well. The Warriors. It's a good time for the Warriors to be asking for things and making requests because they've built up a lot of goodwill over the last couple of years. Forty's just hinted at obviously the sacrifices they made throughout COVID. They had an excellent season this year. They're probably very much the flavour of the neutral NRL supporter as well. And all they're asking for is parity and equity on something. And I think they're well within their reason to be asking for it. And I think the NRL should be doing everything they can to establish that moving forward.
Yeah, and now, just before we get into the Pacific Championships wrap up and tips, 40, there's got to be some West Tigers updates out there. There isn't a week that goes by with something happening. And we're hearing about them maybe having a new stadium built for them out at Liverpool the other week. Now there's more news floating around surely this week.
They're taking blows from all angles as well. It's not just from Western Sydney. It's not just from the wider parts of Sydney, but now it's from Victoria as well, because Roy Masters, I believe it was reporting this week that the West Tigers, despite having the every club being privy to the massive essential handout that the NRL gives them for salary cap and operational expenses, will record essentially a $1.4 or $1.5 million deficit in football operations this year. So despite all their struggles on the field, things are still pretty bad off it there for them.
And Clint, you were saying you read somewhere or heard somewhere about the council looking to spend $100 million on Leichhardt Oval.
Yeah, so the Inner West Council has unveiled their $100 million master plan to restore Leichhardt Oval. It would
restore, that's the word, was it? Restore.
Yeah, and yes, interesting choice of word, isn't it? It would be reliant on funding from the state and federal government, so it'd be from all levels of government to make that happen. And it would include a new 1,500 seat roofed grandstand at the northern end of the ground, as well as improved corporate hosting facilities along the western grandstand. So, look, it seems like every other day that an architecture firm is engaged to do renders of potential stadium plans these days. And I guess Leichhardt, the Inner West Council's trying to push the case to get some government funding. They've made a lot of noise with zero result thus far. This to me smells of them trying to strong arm and create a little bit of, community noise and pressure around it. But fact of the matter is, and we've discussed this at length in the past before, gentlemen, it just doesn't warrant it. $100 million of state and federal money combined, put to yes, the venue's dilapidated, but we've been there and we've discussed this element of it as well. It is a horrible place to travel to. Egress is probably up there with the worst in terms of sporting facilities in this country. It is a terrible place to get in and out of. Beautiful sightlines. If you're talking the bird's eye view, obviously looking over the bay run and the bay itself there, and all those beautiful Moreton Bay fig trees that exist in around the ground. But an interesting tack from the Inner West Council, given that only a few weeks ago, as you just referenced, Sixties, that there was talk and media pressure from the Tigers chairman around a possible development at Liverpool.
Yeah. So It's interesting from a few perspectives. So you're saying that the 100 million buys them a small stand at the
At the northern end.
at the northern end, which is the end where there basically isn't much in the way of spectator facilities or space.
That was where I think it was the students from Riverview crashed
Yeah.
through
That's
the glass.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
Yep. So
Oh my
they're
God.
looking okay. So they can approach that from a health and safety perspective, that they need a proper
Yep.
facility down that end. But it's only getting them a 1,500 seat stand. They would then use the rest of the money to build corporate boxes into the existing concrete stand there. Is that what you're saying? And now,
yep. Along with
this
brand new seats around the ground.
okay. Well, they'd also want to have brand new seating in that stand as well, because
Correct.
those seats are fixed in place. And if you've ever been in the stands there, you cannot stand up like you had. In contrast, when you've got flip seats in a stadium, you can stand up in your seat at your seat, and therefore people can walk past you to get to their seat. In these ones, you can't stand up when someone wants to get past. You actually have to leave your seat, go to, and either stand up on your seat to let someone go past, or go and stand in the aisle just so someone can walk past where you are. And
Risk tearing your ACL in the process.
yes. So, for a start, it is. You inform me that they can't replace those wooden stands because there's a heritage listing on the
Yeah,
Keith Barnes stand.
yeah. In these renders and in the media release from the Inner West Council across the course of the last week, the Keith Barnes stand, which anyone who's been to Leichhardt, that's the stand that's behind the southern end that isn't in alignment with the field.
Always
And
cracks me
the
up.
reason, and the reason for that, for anyone who doesn't know, sharing a little bit of history here, and Sixties and I were actually talking about this earlier this year during a junior reps game. Is the field used to run in the opposite direction, and that's why the Keith Barnes stand is there. For anyone who doesn't know their Leichhardt Oval Balmain Tigers history there, but it's heritage listed and it's still in exactly the same place, untouched in these renders. And I absolutely get them wanting to hold on to an element of the past there, and the fact that it's heritage listed. That's a big deal. But at the same time, I think there's a good way to honor the past by making it usable. If let's say hypothetically that money wasn't an option, and they want to adopt a restoration plan for Leichhardt Oval, you can honor the past by making it better for future generations. Because that entryway, it's only one entry exit into Leichhardt Oval, adjacent to the Keith Barnes stand there, and it's a nightmare. Like from a health and safety perspective and egress perspective, it's not a good experience. And likewise, because of getting in and out of the site as a whole, as opposed to just the stadium, and also with the private dwellings that sit just behind Leichhardt there, capacity is going to be restricted anyway. So, there's as you said before, Six, there's a lot of different angles that we can come up with this, and yeah, I find this just to be another example of a council wanting to do something, trying to apply a bit of government pressure, and hoping the public will make enough noise about it as well to try and render support for it.
Yeah, and well, I think I said to you before when you were telling me about the heritage listing, I said it's probably a heritage listing for some older termites. Acknowledge where their ancestors used to feast on the on the wooden stand there. But it's look, I mean, I feel sorry for West Tigers supporters who have to go Leichhardt, and I know that that's actually going to annoy many of them or anger them for me to say that, because they love the ground, and it's, if you're sitting in that stand at a junior reps game, it's a tremendous view of the ground. It's it's no better than like we have a tremendous view where we sit at Combank Stadium. I wouldn't swap the view that we have sitting around the halfway line on that near the front tier of the stand, the top tier of the stand at the front of it. But it's quite a decent view at Leichhardt Oval. But as soon as you've got any sort of crowd there, the facilities are antiquated. You haven't got good seating. You've got a big old hill that obviously is going to be kept, in a ground that's about to have 100 million, that would theoretically have 100 million pumped into it. A big part of the plan is to keep a hill. My goodness. Like, seriously, what century are we in? What decade are we in this century? Like, you can't have one of the major sports in a country, the premier competition, and this goes for any of the grounds. You don't have hills these days. Like, we're talking about the 60s and the 70s with
Could
hills.
you imagine Anthony Albanese and Peter V'landys in the 2 seconds they spent with President Joe Biden during the week going, "Hey, you want to see this sport, rugby league?" And the first thing they show him is Leichhardt Oval.
Well, let's say they said to them, "Let us show you the eighth wonder of the world. This is one of the venues that we take great pride in." And then
if he wasn't already asleep, they would absolutely put him to bed.
And again, I don't. I'm not saying this to put garbage on a great old venue of a club. Yes, it's got great heritage there. I used to love Cumberland Oval. Would I want Cumberland Oval to be the ground that I'm going to now? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like, it in all seriousness, like,
and to that point, Sixties. I mentioned before about honouring the past. You go down to Parramatta Lease Club on the site prior to heading into the precinct of Combank Stadium. There is still an old turnstile there from Cumberland Road. That's a nice way of honouring the past while having a venue and having something that's fit for purpose for the present and the future.
Yeah, and let me say something to West Tigers supporters, and primarily to the Balmain component of West Tigers supporters. It's the supporters that make the venue special as much as anything else. So when you're talking about it is a special day going to Leichhardt Oval and what have you, if you had a stadium that was more up to date, and again we're talking about the location there is that is the problem with just getting to and from and parking and what have you. It would need a major rebuild. They've got multiple venues that they use. There's a whole lot of other issues that need to be addressed. But let's say, for example, that the infrastructure was sorted, and they were able to build a stadium there. Would there be West Tigers fans who would seriously say, "No, don't build us a new stadium here in this location. We want the hill. We want this old stand here. This is who we are. This is our heritage." Would you seriously want to do that, West Tigers supporters? And if you're arguing that it's it's a special place, I would argue that the supporters who go there make it a special place, and that the atmosphere comes not from the ground itself, but from the people who fill the ground. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, like, there is nothing special about not being able to park within cooey of the place, not having adequate toilets there, not having adequate facilities there, being asked to pay $70 to or whatever it is to sit on the hill. I say there's nothing special about that. It's But anyway, we move on. This is our Eels NRL podcast. Pacific Championships, boys. Thoughts about last week, because there was, I think there was a couple of results that, I certainly wasn't expecting. Not in terms of the final result, but with how the scores panned out. I thought Fiji would do a number on Cook Islands.
Yeah.
Did the Cook Islands lift to Fiji that bad?
Cook Islands in both grades, the men and the women, turned up and were highly competitive. So well done to them there, because, I think we were pretty much in consensus that the Cook Islands were going to be in a lot of trouble against Fiji. Maybe they'd be competitive for 15, 20 minutes and then get absolutely run over. Instead, we had a hard-fought game, like hard.
Yes, yeah, and basically, it was when it mattered, Fiji held the ball, and the winning try was a fairly simple.
Step back from right to left and just catch the fatigue defense. Sure, Sania Taruva found that little hole to dive through.
Yep. The Kiwis winning 50-0. I think from memory, I said I expected it to be about a 30-point.
You went 30-point match. Yeah, I think differential. Yeah, and it was obviously in excess of that. Samoa, you can't run a centre at 5'8", and Dejan being your primary halfback is just an unfair burden on a young guy that isn't a frontline NRL playmaker yet. So having that happen there, and then even a young Fa'alongo at fullback who was immensely talented with the ball in hand was really struggling in defence. The Kiwis just were picking on him in the back line there. And he really couldn't make those last line tackles that someone like Quentin Gufferson, who I suppose we're being spoiled in that regard. But, we get to see him firsthand every week making those plays. And the Kiwis, to their credit, didn't look like a team that had the week off in this competition. They came in and were quite sharp from the get-go. And again, this comes back, their spine. Nickel Clockstar, Dylan Brown, Jerome Hughes, and then at dummy half they had Kieran Foran, who is not a traditional dummy half, but if anyone's going to make a fist of it at dummy half, it's Kieran Foran. They looked very, very good there, and the rest of the team just worked like clockwork around them.
Clint, what do you think of Dylan Brown's form?
I thought he played very well, and the stat line reads as such. He was classic Dylan. He was running. I know he doesn't have a try assist to his name, but a lot of those runs set up the ensuing plays in which points followed. Likewise, he dug into the line with some of the backline movements that he was a part of, and classic Dylan defense as well. Super reliable. Samoa obviously didn't ask very many questions, but it felt like the Dylan that we had become accustomed to prior to his suspension earlier this year. So, it's good for him and it's good for the Eels moving forward that he continues to play well, and he gets a really good opportunity to put his best foot forward again this week against Australia.
I'm not sure which movie covers it better, but what do we think about the Magic Manu or the Full Manu doing the old strip show on the national TV there? I've never seen a jersey be completely shredded like that. You see him plenty get torn up and barely intact, but he actually got shredded to pieces, and he's just out there for a set or two playing with just his shorts on.
That's when you're playing summer touch.
Yeah, shirts, no shirts, and whatnot. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he's a very good player. I'll say that even without a jersey, old Joey Manu, he did all right. So, I mean. It's also a shame that some of the steam about Samoa being a full-on Tier 1 nation has been lost. But again, you look at that back line and that forward pack, it is not a matter of those two units being anywhere near second class. It's just that the biggest gap facing all these developing rugby league nations and teams is developing a world-class playmaking core. And it's the thing that's going to keep them from being consistent performers at the highest level until they can. But Dylan, there's also the opportunity for some of these teams to maybe strike a little bit harder when the iron was hot, because Dylan Brown was eligible for Samoa.
I was just gonna say that the New Zealand team still has players there who are eligible for the island nation.
We've seen with Tonga, who again probably aren't a fully fledged tier 1 country still. They're probably tier 1.5, maybe even like tier 1.1, or whichever way you want to look at it, closer to 1. But the big impetus for them was convincing guys like Jason Taumalolo to turn their back on other national heritage and make Tonga a tour de force. So that's going to be the secret for Samoa moving forwards, is getting guys like, and I know he was injured, but Jerome Luai, Dylan Brown, and again you want an out and out halfback in the mix there too. We're getting those sort of players to commit to Samoa.
Yeah, and we should also mention it wasn't a bad game between England and Tonga.
No, it wasn't
as well.
Very entertaining.
In fact, I thought it was one of the better games. There was elements of the Pacific Championships that have disappointed me in terms of the standards. But I thought the England and Tonga game was quite a good standard.
And
I was just wanted to get onto the Kiwi Ferns and Mate Ma Tonga in the women's, because we certainly saw some Eels players in that match, and there was a certain player in the halves who we have been banging on about in terms of being somewhere in the Eels team where she's going to get her hands on the ball more than what she does, and she delivered 40.
Yeah, Cassie Toihiku, we keep saying it, but she's not an emerging superstar. She has arrived. She is a superstar in the NRLW and the NRLW representative scene now. Incredibly talented. Was doing wonderful things in the centres for us on both sides of the ball, attacking and defending, as well as kick chase too. Was outstanding in that regard too. And we see her in a position now for the Mate Ma'a Tonga team where playing 5'8" alongside another centre. So it wasn't like she was paired ideally with her organising half. She was playing alongside Tiana Penatani. So it had the big limitations in terms of organisation there for the team, and still made a serious impression up against one of the best teams in the world in the Kiwi Ferns. There is no doubt in my mind, Sixties, and I'm sure you both agree, Quinton and Craig, that you can't be putting her in the centres next year for the Parramatta Eels. Like whether it's fullback, whether it's 5'8" with Rachel Pearson as the organising half there. I don't know what the best fit is, but it's got to be one of those two positions. She needs to be one of the primary playmakers in this team.
Yeah. She showed that she has the skill set. She obviously would have a little bit of learning to do in terms of completely reading the game and being in position for kicks and things like that, because there was a couple of times where and you also have to think about what the service is like getting the ball to her, where she wasn't in the best position to take the kick. But when she's connecting with the ball, she's got one of the bigger kicks in the women's game. And
just an out-and-out athlete, isn't she? She's like one of those players that when you play with them or against them and you watch them just warming up and they're just doing everything with ease. Like they're kicking the football, they're catching off the ankles off like a bad pass, and they make everything look easy. Cassie just has that talent. Just a phenom.
And Clint, I don't know whether you have the same impression as well, but I watch her play and I think to myself, I don't think you understand how good you could be. And I think one of the first things for the new incoming coach at the Eels is going to be, obviously, that first thing that we've spoken about, which is get her somewhere in the spine. And secondly, it's going to be just harnessing the self-belief. Because I honestly think the sky's going to be the limit for her. I really do. She seems to be doing things on her ear, and it's like, it's almost like it's, I'm trying to think the right way of expressing this, but it's like she's doing it and there's an element of surprise that she's in her. Well, it's like it's coming easy, but she doesn't have the belief in it. I don't know what it is. It's hard to put into words, but I think I'd like to see her really push the limits of what she can do, because to me, we're already saying she's arrived, and I think her potential is far and away above where she's at right now. So, do you see that? Do you think she doesn't understand how good she could be yet?
Yeah, I do see that. And I think maybe like there's probably a little element of confidence being rocked by the way that the results for the NRLW side this year, and some things not quite working from a team perspective, and being playing in some sides that were on the end of some unfavorable score lines. But she still had plenty of good moments throughout the year this year. And I think it was the previous NRLW season that was her maiden NRL season, and I think she probably had a case of I wouldn't necessarily say like the jitters or the fumbles per se, but she had her moments where I don't think the self-belief was quite there, and there's probably I think she's only young still, isn't she? She's like about 20 years of age.
She just turned. I think she actually turned 20 this week. So
she's still very much finding herself as a person, and your confidence as a person at that age, and asserting yourself, and it's very much a case of when she catches up confidence wise, and has that that mental confidence in herself, that self belief. I think she'll shoot and really take off. And if you ask me personally, I think the best place for her to do that is at fullback, where she's running the ball against a broken defensive line as much as possible, and still has the opportunity to chime into the attacking line. I really think, and it's been shown time and time again, you need to have a strong fullback in the NRLW. I think she's our number one, and we have to persist with her at fullback moving forward.
Okay, now let's get into our tips. Let's stay with the women to start off with, seeing as though we've just been talking about them. We got the Jillaroos taking on the Kiwis. So this is the big one that we've been waiting for. Saturday, 6 o'clock. So we've got the all the players, the big names that we're expecting to be in the team are in the teams this week. So we're seeing let's look at the couple of the main matchups. So you got at fullback Tamika Upton up against RP Nichols. In the halves, you got Aitken and Brigginshaw against Nathan Wong and McGregor. Up front, you've got Shannon Marto and Jessica Elliston up against Maya Hilmoana and Angelina Taikarangi Katoa. That's going to be those Kiwis can really bring it in there in the engine room there. We're seeing Samai Mataufa as well in the middle up against Georgia Hale. That's a big match up there. Our own Kennedy Cherrington's coming off the bench, and we've got a couple of former Eels there. Definitely Nevada George. Ashley Quinlan, was she with us as well?
She was our 5'8" from the second part.
Yeah. So they're lining up off the bench for the Kiwis. So it's going to be a ripper of a game. I should also mention Mele Hufanga for the Kiwis. I mean, we saw and Abigail Roach, like two completely different styles of player there with the two of those up against Surgis and Isabel Kelly for Australia. What way do you see this going, fellas? John, I'll throw to you first.
The Kiwis pushed the Aussies when they met not too long ago in this tournament, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's tough again, but it is difficult to tip a Kiwi victory here. I think it's going to be either a tough loss or a pretty healthy loss, because the Aussies can definitely break out to a pretty healthy lead with the likes of Tamika Upton, who continues to show why she's probably the best player in the code. Just being available and in a primary position for the Jillaroos, sorry. So I think as the person who tipped a close game last time, I think the Jillaroos might end up winning by a bit of a margin in this game.
Yeah, Clint?
Yeah, look, it's hard to disagree with John there. As the players have warmed into the tournament, I don't think we've really seen Australia flex their muscle. As strange as that might sound to say, and I think to your point, 60s about Tamika Upton's presence on the field. I see her ready to do some things. So, like 40, I see potentially a bigger scoreline in this one. I'm anticipating that we might see something in a 14 to 20 plus point victory here.
Okay.
To Australia.
Yep. Look, I think that's probably going to be likely if Australia plays to their potential. It's probably going to be hard to go past them, but I think it will be, if the longer the Kiwis stay in the contest, the more chance there is that something can unravel for Australia. You know what? I'm going to go for a close one in this. I think Australia by 6 points. I think I may want to reevaluate after the first 10 minutes. I think the first 10 minutes, it's like how we usually feel about Parramatta. You can normally tell how they're going to go watching the first 10 minutes of the game. And I think the first 10 minutes will tell the tale of this one. Now, we've also got Australia taking on New Zealand, the Kiwis, in the men's, Saturday, 8:10 p.m. down in Melbourne with this one. Let's have a look at some of the major talking points. Well, we've got Dylan Edwards still there on the wing. Valentine Holmes getting the other wing spot. There's been a little bit of talk around that. Him saying that he's grateful that he's been given the opportunity to be back in the test team so quickly after his indiscretion. I think we pretty much
it must be nice to make a cock up of that magnitude and then to have that kind of backing come for you. To have Mal Meninga come in and say, no, I want this guy in camp. He needs to be in camp. I want to reward him for making a huge mistake.
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, look, I'm sure there would have been no supporter who would have taken exception if he hadn't have been selected in the Australian team for this. I mean, good luck to him, and hope he does well. But I think most supporters would have said, you know what, fair call. If the decision had been made, look, we're not going to put him in the Australian team this year because of that reason. But anyway, Cherry Evans still at 7, getting older. His good mate and your favourite player, 40, Jake Trbojevic, starting prop.
The old stalwarts. Yeah, I mean,
starting prop.
Daly's still not at the peak of his powers, but still a very, very good halfback. I mean, the caliber of the Aussie pack lets you pick, certain players like that, I suppose. And, again, Jake, great club player, fantastic bloke. It is frustrating seeing getting all these rep runs, but, he obviously his character helps a lot with that. And, it's in that way, it's good to see a good guy get rewarded. I mean, in the same breath, we just spoke about Valentine Holmes. So, seeing an idiot get rewarded is frustrating, but I suppose it could be worse than seeing someone like Jake get rewarded.
Well, look, I think it's interesting that our starting props are Jake Trbojevic and Tom Flegler. Now, Flegler had, a very good season for the Broncos, but
it's a fearsome pair up against, though.
Well, they're facing Fisher Harris and Leota. That's a that's a fair opponent to have lining up. I must admit, I'm a little bit surprised that Patrick Carrigan can't get the starting role ahead of Jake Trbojevic. Carrigan's got an enormous motor, really bends the line when he's in attack. But he's coming off the bench in this alongside Lindsay Collins and Harry Grant, where we've got Ben Hunt getting that starting gig ahead of Harry Grant. And, of course, Nico Hines, well documented, getting his Australian jersey there. Let's look at the Kiwi team. A couple of quick takes. The halves, Brown and Hughes, Chance Nickel-Clockstad at fullback. But, of course, the surprise selection there really of Kieran Foran at dummy half. How do you think he went last week at dummy half? I thought he went okay.
It was all right. I mean, Kieran Foran is like one of the halves that would make that transition fairly cleanly, purely because he's so freaking fearless. I say almost clearly to the detriment of his own body throughout his career. So no surprise that he handled the transition there and the increased workload quite effectively. I don't know who's not available that would force Kieran Foran into dummy half in this series.
Brandon Smith had played there previously.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. What is the situation with Brandon Smith? Was he not selected in this squad?
I legitimately don't know because he came back for the finals for the Roosters, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he was playing late season. I'm just trying to think. Did he get injured?
Yeah, did he get injured again? I don't know. Because the Roosters took a lot of damage in that game against Cronulla, so maybe that put him out for the international season.
Because Farmanu Brown is
the other dummy half option. Yeah.
So look, I mean, the rest of the Packers are enormous. Clint, what's your tip in the game?
Well, I mean, you'd like to think that Australia get the job done here, but I look at the New Zealand forward pack and certainly the starting pack. If they can get out to a quick start, New Zealand, there's no reason that they can't win this one. I think Australia gets it done in a tight contest. I think it's probably going to go down to the final 10 minutes before a win is determined. But yeah, if New Zealand get the jump and there's the Penrith middles along with Joseph Tarpanay have their way, they've got enough running power and firepower in New Zealand to hurt this Australian side on the scoreboard. It isn't a formidable Australian side like previous Australian sides have been, but granted, this game is a little bit of a free hit for the teams, given they'll be playing each other in a final again next week. And I was kind of hoping New Zealand may have given some of their extended squad a run. It would have been nice to see Wiramu get a start for New Zealand after playing for New Zealand Day last week. But hopefully the experience in camp and in the squad does him a world of good. But yeah, I think Australia gets it done tightly. I think it's 10 or less margin. But I see the New Zealand forwards definitely giving that Australian starting pack at least a little bit of grief.
Yeah, and look, I'd be very surprised if in the next match, if someone like Payne Haas isn't in the Aussie pack somewhere.
Yeah.
John, what's your tip here?
One thing to monitor before I give my tip is that there are some reports about the health of Cameron Munster. He battles an illness ahead of this game, so if he is going to succumb to that, they'll probably see, presumably, Nico Hines come in from the interchange to start in the halves alongside Dowley, Cherry Evans, and then to bring in another player onto the interchange, whether it's the likes of Liam Martin or Tino or Payne, if I want a bit more beef there. I think Australia, I don't know if they're deserved favourites. I am going to go tip the boil over. I'm going to go for New Zealand to win 20-18, 24-22, a real tight one. and add a bit of spice to ahead of his championship match. I think New Zealand's absolutely got the roster to win this one. They've got a well-balanced backline, forward pack, and most importantly, as we keep banging on, they've got a quality playmaking group. And if Hughes and Brown fire in this one, I think they can get them over the line.
Yeah, I'm gonna go even stronger. I think the Kiwis get the job done by about 8 points.
Ooh.
Yes, and then we come to the next match, which is the Kummels against Fiji Barty, kicking off 4 p.m. Sunday. Looking at this, I mean, we've got a good matchup at fullback with Alex Johnson against Jareem Buller. In the halves, I'm going to suggest that a slight edge maybe to the Kummels with Lachlan Lamb in the halves up against Brandon Wakeham. Interesting to see Ipapi there for the Kummels.
Yes, he's back finally.
Yes, and I think that's gonna give them a real edge there. Look, and given the form of Fiji in this, especially that last game that they've just played against the Cook Islands, that was as unimpressive as I've seen from a Fiji team. Like, that was just
it was middling, to be generous. Yeah,
it really was. I mean, look, I'm going to say it. I thought it was a low standard game. It really was. It was. I've seen better contests at reserve grade level, at New South Wales Cup level. That's just the brutal truth of the game, and that's not disrespecting either team. But especially the Fiji team should have been better than that. The Kummels always give everything, and whether it just doesn't work for them on a particular day or not, that they are going to play with energy and commitment and passion. And I'm going to go with my tips early on this before I jump to you fellas. The Kummels win, and they win by at least 12 points in this.
I'm going to double down on you. Well, sorry, I jumped the gun there. Sorry, Quint.
Yep. So 40's on board with my tip there. Clint, yourself?
Yeah, I see a 13 plus to the Kummels here for exactly the reasons you said. On top of all those factors, in front of a home crowd as well, they'll be well up for it. It's hard to see anything other than a Kummels victory. It would take a big reverse in form from Fiji to cause trouble for them in this one. While there's some really good players across the Fijian backline, I'm not seeing the style of play, nor am I seeing the cattle and the forwards for Fiji to match it with the energy of the Kummels.
Yeah. Okay, so look, we're pretty much wrapped up now with getting up to date with things, but I just wanted to quickly touch on something without notice, fellas. Have any of you noticed where things are heading in the Super League in England with the structure of their competition moving forward?
No.
Okay, so they've decided to go with well, it's almost the sort of thing that led to South being dropped out of the NRL. So in consultancy, in collaboration with the IMG group, the Super League has come up with a grading system.
Oh no.
For every club,
like a feasibility scale.
This is messy already.
Yeah, so it's a criteria to grade every club with a view to working out who participates in the 2025 Super League over there, and they've got the criteria and they end up grading the clubs as either an A category, a B category, or a C category club. Here are the pillars. Fandom, which is obviously their ability to attract fans, and that's both at stadiums, at home, and digitally. Performance is the second pillar. Finance is the third pillar. The stadium is the fourth pillar, and the work within the community is the fifth pillar. And there's actually a book that tells them, a guide that tells them how the points are allocated. So, for example, if we look at fandom, there's the maximum points that they can get is 5 points for fandom. So fandom's worth 5 points, performance 5 points, finances 4.5 points, the stadium 3 points, community 2.5, and when it's all added up, they get a score out of 20.
Who gives a 2.5? What?
Yes, I know. So,
Oh.
so if we break up fandom, right, attendance is it gets a 2.5, viewership 1, and digital 1.5, and then digital, that 1.5 is broken up into social following 0.2, website visits 0.5, and total
Oh my goodness.
0.8. Then now here's how it's broken up. Average attendance. If they get average attendance of greater than 7,500, they get the maximum 2.5. If they average more than 3,000, their points is 2.00. If it's greater than 1,500, I mean, we're talking about some disaster numbers here, aren't we? 1.5, and less than 1,500, 0.75. Now, let's bear in mind that there's an element of comparing apples and oranges here, because they're comparing every club, no matter the tier, is based on the same criteria. Now, how is a club that's competing, say, in the championship, I think that's the name of the level below the Super League,
Mhm.
they're not going to get attendances that the Super League does. So straight away, the clubs can't compete with the Super League clubs for attendance. They're not going to get the same viewership on television as the main carried sport. You know, like the Super League gets that. They're not going to get the same digital response. Like,
There's a
it's
case of haves and have-nots already building.
already building, correct, right? And so anyway, there's lots of criterias and controls and all this sort of stuff, and there's points for social following, you know, like there's combined like in the digital scoring, you know, the social following more than 500,000 gets a 0.2 points, more than 100,000 0.15, more than 50,000 0.1, more than 10,000 0.05. I mean, it's like it's really complex looking into this. I mean, like, as far as fans are concerned, they're obviously just interested in whether the team wins or not. And performance only gets you a maximum of like 4 points, and then I think there's a bonus 1 point for winning championships, and the Super League gets a 0.75 straight away if you win the Super League.
You know how
Whereas,
corporate entities insist on, like, you know, outsourcing these big reviews to, you know, rebrand and re-image and restructure, and it ends up being like really convoluted and a waste of time and a lot of waste of money. Like, this sure sounds like that.
oh, absolutely. So I was only drawn to it because I saw a little bit of social media around it, where they announced the gradings as they would be at the end of this year, which then gives the clubs that they did that. They've graded them already to give them an idea about where they sit going into.
like a residual ranking.
So, like, here's where you sit, and a club. So the top club was the Leeds Rhinos, who got an A category and a score of 17.49. Right, so all these points, it really does come into some strange numbers. Wigan Warriors 16.87, St Helens 16.78, Catalan, who played in the grand final, 16.73. Let's see. Let me see if I can find a fairly well-known club. Castleford ranked 13 and were a B category club. Came out as a B category. That means could be considered to play in the Super League. If you get an A, you're guaranteed to play in the Super League. B means you can be considered, and there was only seven clubs which came in as guaranteed. So, and Castleford came in 13th. So, and the London Broncos, who obviously they want to see in the Super League, and they're trying to really push. They ranked 24th.
Oof.
And got a score of 8.07. 8.0, like,
Yeah.
Jesus.
You're not gonna grow a club if you don't give them, like, if they wanted a club to be, like, if they wanted to grow an area for a club, enter a new market, get a new market happening somewhere, they're not going to end up in the Super League in 2025. The London Broncos, they're not going to have the crowds for a start. They've got to try to grow crowds. They can't compete. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because it's interesting that they're going down that path in rugby league in England, and I'm not too sure whether that's necessarily going to work. But it's interesting, the points that are there for the stadiums and how the stadiums get ranked. I mean, some of those clubs that are playing in the second and third division, I mean, they're playing at grounds that are quite small, but then they get points even if they're playing at a small ground. However, they get points for filling the capacity of the ground.
So it's a bit of a
So if
false
you're playing
equivalency.
it's like anyway, management consultants, mate. That's they're evidently running rugby league over in England. So, and it's not a criticism of management consultants. That's a criticism maybe of the people that are running the competition.
The RFL.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, fellas. Jam-packed episode once again. What was the runtime, mate? What are we at?
148 and counting. So
yeah.
The light show. It's the off season.
That's it.
brevity is the soul of wit, and I guess our soul lies elsewhere.
So, fellas, thank you again for your fine work tonight. Thank you to all of our listeners tuning in, and to the people who continue to provide positive feedback for us. We really do appreciate the fact that you listen and you take the time to give us feedback. Thank you, of course, once again to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. It's fantastic that you help us to be able to get our Eels content and NRL content out there to the listeners. And as I always say, fellas, go you mighty Eels.